value is, without any questions, the foundation of every painting. Because think about it, if we have a painting with good values, we can take away the color, we can take away the brushwork, maybe we can take away even the composition, and it's still going to look good. Value is what makes the painting look 3D or realistic, or have depth in general. So just to be clear, value in terms of importance is way above color, shapes, composition, all of that. So if you're a beginner artist and you're struggling to paint, you're struggling to make some good art, I guarantee that the thing that's giving you trouble is value. Because also, to be fair, out of all of the fundamentals, value is the most difficult one to master. But if you're just starting out and you were only going to focus on a value, so this means basically just painting in grayscale or in black and white, and kind of neglecting the rest of the fundamentals like shape language, proportion, color, of course, because we're not using color here. If you only focus on the most important stuff, if you put away the rest of the fundamentals and you only focus on one thing, that's really just doing a bunch of value studies. That's really gonna get you a long way. Because once you have mastered the foundation, now it's kind of easier to learn the rest of the fundamentals, and you don't find it so difficult because that most important thing, you're already good at doing it. And so if you mess up in the rest of the things like color or your shapes, your proportions, like the rest of the random painting fundamentals, whatever, it's not really gonna matter that much. Like, you can actually get away with neglecting a few other things as long as your values are solid. Now, what are the best ways to practice your values and get good at this? How do you do it? Well, I specifically recommend doing 2 exercises for practicing your values, which I consider are the most effective. And so the first exercise is doing what is called value distillations or value studies, which is basically simplifying your values. Instead of painting with, if you look at a photo, you have a ton of values. You might have like 80 values or 100 values, like depending on the photo. And you want to simplify all of those values into only 2 or 3. So this means no blending, combining the shapes together, and overall simplifying the shapes and the values that you have in only 2. And this exercise works amazing for learning how to simplify your values, because on the early stage of a painting, you want to keep things very simple. You want to learn how to simplify, because if you don't simplify, if instead of simplifying, you go very complex and you start adding, like trying to add a lot of detail right away, the final thing, it's not going to work out, because you have to have a simplified foundation, a simplified early stage for the painting to look good later on, and to look consistent and convincing. You have to have that simplified early stage. And here's where I introduced that second value exercise, which is doing thumbnails. And I absolutely love this exercise because it's just painting very small. And since you're painting very small, like you're currently seeing me here doing a bunch of thumbnails, it's just a lot easier to simplify. It literally forces you to simplify your shapes and your values, because you can't really add detail. So here you can see I'm not really zooming in. I'm not even focusing on adding detail, right? Because I'm just painting the early stage, if you will. I'm not really detailing or rendering. If I wanted to render, I would probably zoom in a lot more, or make the thumbnail just a lot bigger. But I'm not doing that, because I feel like practicing thumbnails is more for the purpose of focusing on the shapes that you see instead of adding lines and detail. So instead of me focusing on trying to paint the eyes, let's say if I'm painting a portrait, I'm not really gonna paint the eyes. Instead of me trying to paint the eyes that is compounded by a lot of wrinkles and eyelashes, thin lines and shapes, instead of me trying to represent all of those thin lines, what I'm gonna do instead is just simplify the whole thing with just one brush stroke, basically 1 or 2 brush strokes. So I'm simplifying the entire structure of the eye that, again, is compounded by a lot of thin shapes with only 1 brush stroke. And as long as the values are okay, as long as the values are looking good, the whole thing is going to look good. Even if I simplify it to this degree, it's still going to make sense, all right? And this is the goal with value, and doing this, of course, then you can zoom in and start adding more detail. You can then add more blending. And I feel like both of these exercises target very well like different aspects of the same thing. Like, not really different fundamentals because, you know, we're basically doing a similar thing here with this thumbnail. So I'm kind of making a value distillation, which, you know, I wouldn't really call it a value distillation because I'm still using blending. I'm using a bit of blending and opacity, but I'm still simplifying. Like I'm also simplifying the values themselves, but I'm also simplifying mostly the shapes here. So you know, it's just like you're pretending that you're doing a normal painting, but you're putting away all the intimidating factors and all the planning that comes with making an actual painting. And the good thing about only focusing on value and having the intention to get better at this is that there are only so many mistakes you can do. Because again, you put away the color, you put away the shapes, and you know, you only focus on, okay, I want to improve this single thing, which is having accurate values. Again, there's only so many mistakes that you can do. Personally, the most common mistake that I tend to see on beginner artists when they're studying value are things like not making their dark values dark enough, for example, or their light values light enough. And fortunately, that is a very easy fix. I feel like it can be a little hard to identify when, of course, when you're a beginner and you don't really know what you're doing too much. But once you are aware of this, once you're aware of, okay, I'm probably not getting the value range quite right, then it's actually kind of easy to notice these things in your art. And, you know, by repetition, it just becomes second nature, and suddenly, like, you don't have any issues with this anymore. You eventually stopped making these mistakes, and now you can focus on other things. And let's say you'll get to a point where you completely master value and your values are good all the time and you don't have any issues with that anymore. Then you can worry about things like, okay, proportion is probably, in my opinion, even more important than color. Then you can try jumping into color and all of the other random fundamentals. But you have to start kind of in order. You know, you can start by improving your composition. If your values are garbage, you know, you have to start with the actual important things. Another beginner mistake that I see, that this is also more of an intermediate mistake as well, is not being subtle enough with your values. Have very subtle transitions and playing changes, and the more subtle you can be, the best of an artist you'll end up being, right? So yeah, you can end up adding more contrast then if you want, but the rule is that you keep your stuff as subtle and simplified as you can, and that then you deliberately decide to add more details or contrast in the places that you you know, choose in a mindful way. I mean, if you want to learn more about value, I have a bunch of videos here on my YouTube talking about doing the thumbnail things and the distillation, the value studies, so you can go and watch those videos. And if you want to learn from me directly, you can join my Discord community and I will make reviews of your art. I'll give you feedback every day and I will help you have an art transformation just like I did. If you're interested in that, check the top link in the description to join the community. Goodbye.